Stop what you are doing. This is not a rumor anymore. Citadel is yanking roughly $50 in hedge fund operations out of Miami's orbit, and the people in charge are acting like the floor just shifted. Because it did. And if you live in Miami, invest in Florida, or work anywhere near finance, this should concern you. Not later, right now. The public story is going to sound calm, strategic, normal. But behind that calm language is a very specific emotion: panic. Because when a flagship player signals it might not be anchored here, every other company watching starts rerunning the same calculation in their head. Think about what Miami sold the world over the last few years: a new Wall Street, a sunny, low tax, pro business escape hatch, a place where capital comes to stay. Now imagine one of the biggest symbols of that narrative suddenly going cold. Not with a press conference, not with fireworks, with quiet operational withdrawal. That is how capital moves when it is nervous. And here is where it gets worse. Citadel is not just a company. It is a gravity well. It pulls lawyers, accountants, quant talent, high-end real estate demand, philanthropic signaling, political attention, and the one thing cities crave most: validation. So when a gravity well starts to move, everything around it gets lighter, then unstable, then it starts drifting. Pause here, because this detail matters. It is not only about jobs, it is about the confidence stack Miami has been building. And confidence is the first thing to crack when a market senses exit risk. Now, the mayor does not have to say the word panic out loud. You see it in the scramble. You see it in the sudden need to reassure. You see it in the careful phrasing, the urgent meetings, the quiet outreach to other executives. Because the nightmare scenario is not one firm leaving, it is the contagion effect. Let that sink in. Contagion is not just a banking word, it is a psychology word. Because every CFO and founder in Miami hears the same signal. If Citadel can reconsider, anyone can. And that turns a boomtown into a watch list in a single quarter. Now consider the implications. Miami's recent identity has been built on momentum. Momentum is fragile. It does not die with a bang. It dies with a question. Are they staying? Are they expanding? Are they quietly reducing exposure? And then something else breaks. Because once doubt enters the room, incentives shift. Developers get cautious. Lenders tighten. Recruiters stop overpromising. And workers who moved for the story start wondering if they bet on the wrong city. This is where the pressure compounds. A $50 billion hedge fund operation is not just trading screens. It is high-income payroll. It is tax base. It is commercial leases. It is prestige that attracts more prestige. So if that engine downshifts, the shock does not stay in finance. It bleeds into restaurants, gyms, private schools, luxury condos. Even the city's bond narrative, whether people admit it or not, starts to feel different. Read that again. A corporate maybe can become a municipal problem. Now, here is the part nobody expects. Even if Citadel keeps a footprint, the psychological damage is already done if the market believes Miami is not a lock. Because capital cares less about speeches and more about signals. And a pullback, a restructure, a relocation of key operations, even partially, reads like one thing: risk management. And risk management is what happens right before a broader reset. But the real problem is this: Miami's rise has been tied to a set of conditions that can change fast. Interest rates, insurance costs, climate exposure, infrastructure strain, remote work reversals, political risk. Any one of those is manageable. All of them together, that is how narratives snap. So, if a firm like Citadel looks at its long-term operational map and decides it wants less exposure here, you have to ask the uncomfortable question. What do they see that everyone else is ignoring? Think about that. The richest, most informed players are not guessing. They are gaming out scenarios. They are stress testing. And when they move, it is not emotional, it is surgical. Now let's talk about the mayor's bind. Because the mayor is trapped between two realities. Reality one is the brand. Miami is winning. Miami is unstoppable. Miami is the future. Reality 2 is the spreadsheet. If a major anchor reduces presence, the city has to replace not just jobs, but aura. And aura is not something you can legislate into existence. This is where things turn, because if the mayor reacts too strongly, it confirms there is a problem. If the mayor reacts too weakly, it looks like denial. Either way, the audience that matters most, executives, investors, lenders, start watching the reaction itself as a signal. That is the scary part. The response becomes part of the data. Now consider how quickly sentiment can flip. In a boom, everyone copies everyone. In a scare, everyone also copies everyone. It is the same herd behavior, just pointed in the opposite direction. And that is why this is not just one company. This is a stress test of Miami's entire pitch. Can Miami hold high finance operations through cycles? Or was it a hot money moment that fades the second conditions tighten? Pause here. Because this is where ordinary people get blindsided. You do not have to work at Citadel to feel the effect. If high earners stop flowing in, housing demand shifts. If housing demand shifts, prices wobble. If prices wobble, recent buyers get trapped. If recent buyers get trapped, spending slows. If spending slows, local businesses feel the squeeze. That is how a headline becomes a household problem. Now you might be thinking, 50B is not physically sitting in Miami. Correct. But operations matter, people matter, the decision center matters, because the decision center is where influence sits, where donations go, where boards get built, where future startups spin out. And if that decision center leans away, Miami does not just lose money, it loses gravity. But here is where it gets even worse. When a city builds its identity around being the new hub, it becomes vulnerable to one brutal question. What if the hub moves again? Finance is not loyal. It is opportunistic. It goes where the incentives are until the incentives change. And incentives always change. So Miami's challenge is not to win a year. It is to hold a decade. Through downturns, through storms, through tax fights, through insurance spirals, through infrastructure stress, through reputational hits. Now, if you are the mayor and you hear that a marquee player is pulling back, you do not just worry about that player. You worry about the next 5 calls you are going to get from other firms asking for concessions, from developers asking what you know, from reporters sniffing for blood, from donors asking if the dream is safe, and that is why the mood shifts fast. Because the mayor is not reacting to one decision. He is reacting to the possibility of a chain reaction. Let that sink in. Cities do not collapse from a single event. They collapse from cascading confidence failure. Now, to be clear, Miami is not finished. But that is not the point. The point is that a warning light just came on in the dashboard of the Miami Miracle. And warning lights matter because they change behavior. They change timelines, they change risk appetite. So here is the question you should be asking. Not is Citadel leaving, but what does Citadel's move tell every other powerful player to do next? Because if the answer is reassess, the reassessment becomes the story. And once reassessment becomes the story, capital stops expanding. It starts hedging. And hedging is the beginning of withdrawal. This is where things start getting scary. Miami's rise has been loud, but exits are quiet. They happen in org charts, lease renewals, hiring freezes, executive relocations, remote first decisions. You do not see it until you feel it. So watch what happens next. Watch the hiring, watch the leases, watch the real estate absorption, watch whether other firms start using the same language. Strategic, optimizing, rebalancing, those are the words people use right before they leave the party. And if the mayor is panicking, it is because he understands something most people do not. A city's reputation is a financial asset. And when that asset takes a hit, the cost is paid by everyone. In the next 90 days, you are going to see whether Miami stabilizes this narrative or whether it spirals. Because if Citadel's move becomes the permission slip for others to follow, the Miami boom story does not end with a crash. It ends with a slow, brutal fade. And by the time it is obvious, it is too late to stop.